All right. Hello. Happy Friday, everybody.
Hey,
I,
hey.
I'm Bill. This is Mark. And we're here with the Titans of Publishing show. And today we wanted to talk about, well, not really talk. We want to rant.
We'll start with talk and then we'll segue to rant.
Yeah. So if I'm a little less animated than normal, you'll know why. And if I'm a little more animated than normal, you'll know why, because I'm sick. Um, the family has this flu bug, and it's been going around the house, and it's kind of been like circulating and coming back and going around. And so, depending on my energy level, this might be really good or really bad. So we wanted to talk about one of our favorite and least favorite things all at the same time, webinars. So I'm going to let you start, Mark, because it was kind of your idea. I should
Okay.
kind of, it was your idea. So take it away.
All right. Well, thanks. Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge you for, having the spirit, the show must go on, because when we chatted earlier, like, hey, I feel like crap. And then I was like, okay, let's not do a show. And you're like, yeah, let's do a show. So I'm like, well, if you can show up and you're not, you're feeling like maybe 20% of normal. There's something wrong with me if I didn't show up. So thank you for your commitment, because I think a lot of people would have just easily taken a pass. So
Yeah,
hope you feel better.
the show has to go on. So yeah, we'll just do it. And I apologize in advance if it's not very good, because we'll just see how it goes.
Okay. So
but everybody's always up for a good rant. So let's go.
Okay. So the subject is webinars, and I have different perspectives on webinars. And before I get to the rant, I'll start with the good. Now let's look at webinars. From a point of context. There's one point is I can be an attendee. I can be a consumer of webinar content. And then also I can be on the opposite side, and I can be a presenter, or one who is actually, showing, presenting whatever, my topic is. And the reason, if you belong to any Facebook marketing groups, you know that everybody's like, hey, I've got this webinar, it converts, and we did 80,000 this month and all this stuff. And I'm not doubting those numbers, but I thought, let's just kind of unpack it. There's a lot of times kind of, maybe people maybe don't outright lie, but maybe they stretch things a little bit. Maybe they stretch the truth. So one of the things I like about webinars is, I think the statistic is 60 to 70% of us process information visually with our eyes. So it's a really good mode to absorb and consume information. And a lot of times, if you're given the choice by, looking at a video for an hour as opposed to, going through a 100-page PDF or a number of other different vehicles, hey, guess what? You're going to naturally default to the webinar. So I like that part of it. What I don't like, rant alert, is everybody is kind of working from the same kind of formula playbook. And I know it because I went through speaker training. And there are things that absolutely drive me nuts about webinars. The chit chat. I've actually been on webinars where it was literally 30 to 40 minutes before they actually got into the content. Now, I would have thought they would have looked at their stats, because you can tell, number one, who's on the webinar, what kind of level of attention they have. But yeah, so I haven't heard any webinars, and we're not going to name names unless we really get into a rant. I haven't seen the chit chat as much of an issue, but I got to tell you, how many times do you have to see, hey, the rags to riches? I was sleeping on a park bench. I was living in this, this goes back to Tony Robbins. I was living in this, 300 square foot apartment. I was washing my dishes in the bathtub, and that may be true, and I understand why they do it, because it's one of those things like, hey, if I could go from point A to point B, you could too, because look in what worse shape I was in. I'm going to say one more thing, Bill, and then I'll let you jump in. The other reason and I've actually done an earn the right, but I haven't done the whole kind of, rags to riches things. And more is what gives me the right to be speaking to you about this topic. So it's more of a credibility builder as opposed to a biz app. Look at all the money you're going to make. And that's another thing that we could kind of get into a rant as well. So those are my initial thoughts. This is a dialogue, not a monologue. So, I'll turn it over to you for any feedback and your 2 cents.
Well, yeah, I think you touched on something that was really important. There's a formula to webinars, and there's no doubt they work for marketers, salespeople.
Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, they work. And the typical format is, hey, we're going to have this hour-long webinar, free content, and then it turns out to be 30 minutes of bullshit. This is how I made it to where I am. This is who I am. This is why I'm so great. Not in those words, but it's the backstory. And everybody likes stories. I mean, everything I watch or listen to has an important backstory if it's going to be successful. However, sometimes they're prolonged. I mean, and maybe it's just me, but I think I could tell you my backstory in 5 or 10 minutes, as it pertains to what I'm about to talk about. If you wanted to read about my biography, I'd have to write it and you'd have to read it. And that would take a while because I'm old. But I think some of these guys just go overboard. So there's 30 minutes of how we got here. And then there's 30 minutes of that thing that we were going to talk about, that free content. And a lot of webinars are really good about free content. They really are. And then there's always the inevitable pitch, which is where the money is made, which is why they're successful, which is how people measure the success. And that's sometimes, so that hour-long webinar, the pitch starts, at minute 50 or minute 55, minute 60. The webinar's over as far as most people are concerned, because let's face it, most people have time conflicts or time constraints, and they schedule an hour. So I wouldn't be surprised if abandon rates are pretty high when the pitch comes, not just because people are averse to the pitch itself, but because they're out of time. People who have been on webinars as consumers a lot know that they always last longer than allotted time. And I think marketers try to sell it as though, hey, I promised you an hour and I gave you 2. Well, an hour of it was pitch, and that's not really free content. I think that's what, kind of messes, bothers people the most. So, I mean, I think the conversions are probably pretty high because, the touch points are there and you're talking to somebody somewhat live and in the moment. But, they do tend to drag on and on.
Well, here's, as you were talking, a couple thoughts came up. So one is, and I've seen other webinars do this where people were selling something and there was actually really good engagement even during the offer. And that is Q&A. So, there may be some questions specifically about, okay, what do I get? What does the program include? But I, when I've attended webinars, I've known, that the offer is coming. Maybe I had some mild interest. Maybe I was just kind of curious. But I've actually gotten some good value out of those Q&A sessions.
Yes.
Because here's why. It's kind of like it's the presenter unplugged. They have a script. They have their PowerPoint. They're staying on message. And sometimes when you get them, to just be kind of, real, I'm not saying that the PowerPoint isn't real, but unscripted or unplugged, you actually get some good nuggets. Now, there's no guarantee that you're going to get that, and some people, are more hypey than others. I'm going to mention a couple names, but in a good way, because I've attended their webinars and they've sold things, and yet I found that they had delivered value. One is, and they're both in the local marketing space. I mean, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with the local marketing space. I'm thinking, like I've done some, local marketing, and I think I just have more of a comfort level with more corporate marketing. But occasionally, I'm like, hey, maybe this is something that I should check into and check out. The two marketers I'm referring to, one is Paul James. I learned some really good stuff from him in terms of Google My Business. I mean, he was really my entree into what that is, how powerful it is. And I've actually used the information that he provided just with his free content with a couple of SEO clients. And the other one is David Sprague. David has a whole community, a local marketing genius. I was in his mastermind. I've known David for years before he started all this, and he delivers some really good content. There are people that have criticisms or complaints about everybody, but I think by and large his sentiment level, if you will, is positive. So I'm sure there are other marketers, that I'm forgetting. I attended another local marketing thing, and what impressed me about his presentation was, how many times have we heard, the latest greatest thing are funnels? Well, not only did he talk about funnel marketing, but he had these amazing funnel maps, process maps. And I actually complimented him during the webinar. And I don't know if he was going to do this anyway, but he's like, hey, that's a great idea. I'll include it in the product and what you buy. And I was like, wow. So that's another point is if you're attending a webinar, and you find the content's valuable, interact, because a lot of times, either the presenter themselves or if they have like one of their support staff, you may be able to trigger something that ends up being a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, no, I definitely agreed. And there are some fabulous webinar guys and gals out there. And like you, I'm not really going to go name names on who the really good ones are. You know who they are. You also know who the ones are who annoy the hell out of you. But I should probably do more webinars. When I was doing webinars,
Me too.
they were successful from my perspective, and I got good feedback. Now, but I tended to keep them, half an hour to an hour with just completely actionable content, not a big pitch at the end, and they, I still felt like I did fairly well with them.
Okay, here's a question.
Yeah.
Do you think our perspectives, because we're pretty much on the same page on this, do you think it comes because of I would kind of categorize us as we are more business and kind of corporate marketing. There are people in the IM space, internet marketing, that they've never actually, and they're proud of this, they've never actually worked in the real world. They've done kind of created little products or software or whatever. And most of my career was spent working in the advertising marketing industry. And I do notice there's a big change between kind of the biz op, the kind of, software as a service, webinars, and more corporate webinars. And there's pros and cons to each. I mean, one of the things that I don't like about corporate webinars is they're so damn boring. I mean, they're literally, it's just, I'm like, falling asleep. So, that's one good thing. Even if you don't, it's kind of like, did you ever see the Howard Stern movie, Private Parts?
I tried to watch it a few times.
It's one of those guilty pleasures. And the funny thing is, they want to can him. It says, he moves to New York. I think he was in Washington, D.C., and they keep waiting for the new ratings to come out so they can him. And the ratings come out, and they had two kind of different reports. One is people that like him, and the people that didn't like him listened at least, I think it was 2.5 times longer
That's true.
than the ones that didn't. And the response was, well, we didn't know what he was going to say next, and so that's why we were listening. So, I mean, even if you don't like something, even if you don't like somebody's style or presentation, doesn't mean they're not effective. You may have been turned off personally, but I mean, I guess the question is, have you ever purchased or invested in a program where the spokesperson, the messenger, there was just absolutely no level of connection?
No. No. How about you?
Well, I think the level of rapport and connection, I think it's also, because both of us are very values-based in terms of our business, that kind of rapport is important. I probably have, I could tell you, and this is when I went through a buying spree, and I'm like, man, wow, I don't know what I was thinking. I spent $1,500 for a program that was basically two guys, and it was all because of hype. And I bought into the hype, and it was two guys like recording phone conversations, and a really big marketer promoted it. And I'm not going to name names because everybody's moved on. But what they did, it was really sleazy, is because the audio quality was so poor, they started getting refunds. They backdated the guarantee period, so they could work in some. So yeah, and I was like, what am I going to do with this $1,500 worth of stuff? I think I didn't even unwrap it from the shrink wrap. I just tossed it. So
yeah.
Lesson learned.
So two things that I think. And I already forgot the second thing. That's how my day's going. But one thing that I think would be really valuable, and I don't know who would provide this, and the name Tim Castleman comes to mind, because he does the notes for the traffic and conversion big deals every year, and
he also does Russell Brunson's funnel hacking too.
Now I don't know if this would be worth anybody's while, but I would much rather read notes from a webinar than watch the damn thing myself, because I could read it and get the gist of it faster in way less than an hour or 2 hours or whatever. I could just read the notes. And if somebody wanted to provide that service, I think they'd have an audience. I don't know how lucrative it would be. I don't know how much you could charge for the notes, because I mean, after all, isn't Tim charging like, I don't know, just $27 or something like that for like a 3-day conference or something?
Well, that's if you got
value, right?
Really, really early. Well, let me ask you about this, because that's a really good point. I do know some marketers, and granted, it's it's not as detailed as the notes, because when you're taking notes. And Tim's product, I've purchased it every year for like the last 5 years. It's really grown and evolved. I mean, I think the last version was like 200 pages of really good stuff. It wasn't just kind of like, somebody bought a transcript and it's just type. I mean, they really, went to, because that's the other thing too, kind of segmenting and making the content easy to consume. I've seen some marketers, that do webinars. I think this is smart too, because again, it's giving people a different way to consume the content. They send a PDF out the next day that's basically their presentation, their slides. So you actually have kind of something that you can look at if you prefer to do that rather than look at or listen to the webinar. Now, it's not as good as handwritten, customized notes. But I think it goes a little bit towards what you were talking about in terms of, hey, everybody's busy, and this is something I can look at, or I'm on the Stairmaster at the gym.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree. So I don't think we went too ranty on this, but I think we brought up, you especially brought up some really good points about kind of like pet peeves and what really bugs you about webinars. But at the end of the day, for marketers, they're very beneficial, and for consumers they're beneficial, because it is it's a way to get to know the marketer. It's a way to get to understand the product, and if you If you're in buying mode, that's cool, and if you're not, that's cool too, because most of them do deliver value at some, throughout that hour-long period. It's just at the end that turns, a lot of people off. But if you're going to watch something that's based about on marketing and sales, you probably have a fair expectation, and you should, that you're going to get, some kind of offer, some kind of offer made at the end, which is fine. It's totally cool.
Yeah, I mean, and I think there are certain marketers, and I think this is more of the maybe the corporate kind of approach. You don't have to apologize for making an offer. I mean, you just need to be transparent. So I mean, and I think that was one thing that, and this actually is a good way to wrap up. I have one question I'd love to get your response on. Webinars, like any other marketing channel and vehicle, have evolved. So, in terms of the script, in terms of the formula, within the first 5 minutes, you need to say, hey, we're going to have, and there's all sorts of buzzwords. Some people don't call it offer. People say, hey, we're going to have an opportunity. We're going to share something with you as a next step. I remember some people will, when I was presenting kind of, offers from the stage, they would like, it's continuing education. So as long as you tell people kind of what it is and what to expect. But the question I had for you is, and I don't necessarily have the answer, what are some trends? Well, how do you see webinars changing or evolving? Because, are we at webinar fatigue? I mean, depending on how many lists you belong to, you could spend every day pretty much wall to wall attending live webinars, attending on-demand webinars, attending, replay webinars. So obviously, marketers would not be doing them if they weren't getting them. But like anything else, you just have to wonder, is there a saturation point? Is there a tipping point?
Yeah, I think there is, and I think I reached it about a year ago, to be honest. I haven't watched many webinars in the past year, but I will say that I think the trend, or at least a good practice, is to do what some folks are doing, which is it's actually a paid webinar. You pay, you pay to watch, and you get all of the content there. There is no pitch. The pitch is the product. Colin Terrio does that, and it's great. And they're
I think
but
I think Ryan Dice has done that before. I think he does that Black Friday thing where for like $7-10 you can pay to attend the webinar.
Yeah, and I think, you know what you're going to get, and because you've invested, in some cases, considerable money to watch, you'll watch, or you have a greater tendency to watch. Whereas when it's a free one, so here's my biggest, and this is me. This is my biggest failing when it comes to being a consumer of webinars. I'll get on a webinar and I'll see squirrels, and I can't look at a screen for an hour, listen to the same person go on and on. Even if it's really interesting, I will fall asleep. You'll catch me yawning. You'll catch me looking at other stuff on the web. That's me. Whereas if it's and to be honest, though, even those paid webinars, I generally don't watch them when they're live. I watch them after they're recorded, so that I can do it at my own leisure. I am very ingrained in me is the whole TiVo method, which is I watch stuff when I want to, not when you want me to. So I like recordings. And I think that's where most people are going to go. And I think they're being conditioned, or allowing themselves to be conditioned for that kind of methodology. And I think that's probably, a good trend. Consume what you want when you want to. And whether you have to pay for it or not, that's one thing. But I think if you do pay for it, you're more vested in it, and you're more likely to watch it, which I think is a good thing for everybody.
I just thought of another pet peeve. As you're talking about consuming information, on the replay when they disable the progress bar. So you literally have to kind of watch the entire thing. And I know why they do it. I know it's like, hey, we have a story to tell, and if you hop around, we're not going to be able to tell the story. But going back to your thing, I mean, if it's a replay, and they don't have one of those buttons where you can speed up the delivery, it's really asking a lot for me to just sit there without distraction. And again, I know why they do it, and obviously if it didn't work they wouldn't be doing it, but I noticed less and less webinars have that disabled feature, which I'm kind of grateful for. And in terms of trends, I think it'll be interesting. I saw a really amazing stat. I was watching a video from like a training that wasn't a webinar. It was on YouTube, and the guy said, the presenter said, the average viewing time of a video on Facebook, which is what we're doing right now, 6 seconds. So you talk about webinar fatigue, video fatigue. So in terms of trends, I mean, we talked about pricing. I'll be interested to see webinar format, webinar length, or doing more kind of targeted webinars where maybe you're not doing the whole story, the whole 2-hour plus. Look, we jammed it up with all sorts of content, but it's very laser focused. I know when I start doing webinars, I know you and I both have different software platforms. I'd like to test things, and I'd like to get some feedback from my tribe about what they want and what they don't want in terms of webinars. And I'll just say this one other thing in closing. To make the distinction, most of, I think, what our pet peeves are with the marketing webinars, where you're going to be selling something.
Yeah.
I know, one other kind of positive comment is I purchased a software as a service. One of the bonuses was 3 kind of step-by-step tutorial bonus webinars where it was all content. They weren't trying to sell you. Another part of the program was like, hey, here's how to consume what you bought. I bought 3. They've delivered 7. And I actually reached out to the product creator and said, man, thanks for over-delivering. And I think that was, he didn't have to do that. Probably he did that to, minimize refunds and some other things. But he really kind of felt like it was something that he wanted to provide for the community. And I think everybody was appreciative that he did.
No, that's pretty cool. That's really cool. Yeah, so I think that's a good wrap up.
Not too ranty.
Not too ranty. I can't talk and type at the same time, so yeah. So I just want to say thank you, Marc, for that, because it's something we've talked about in the past before, kind of just amongst ourselves, and I know other people feel the same thing and have expressed similar things. But hey, I made it through without barfing, so that's a plus.
It's a major plus. Although we probably would have had more engagement because people would have just reached out and had all their home remedies to get you through this crisis.
True. So I just want to say I'm thankful I made it through. It's Friday. I'm going to rest for a couple days, and then we'll come back next week and do this again. So thanks for everybody for joining, and thank you, Marc, and everybody have a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy.
All right. Bye.